Today we're going to continue learning about solving absolute value equations. So I've put the steps here again, and I've tried to simplify them as much as possible because you must follow the steps like I show them in order to get the answers that you are supposed to get for these problems. So you can't really choose when you make your two cases. You must make your two cases as soon as you have everything on one side of the equation isolated in absolute value. So we'll do a couple of problems together, and then you'll be able to try one on your own. For the first one here, what we're going to do is we first need to isolate the absolute value, what's in absolute value. So we see right here, this is what's in absolute value. This is what we have to get by itself before we do anything else, before we make any cases. So we see that the absolute value of the problem is being divided by 2. 2 is what's outside of absolute value, and it's being divided. So to undo division, we know we need to use multiplication. One variation of multiplication that I can use if I put the 12 over 1 is cross multiplication. So this is the absolute value of negative 9g minus 3 equals 2 times 12, which is 24. So now we see all we have on this side is an absolute value. Once you have one side so that all that's there is what's inside absolute value, this is the step where you must make your cases. Your cases must be made now. So we must set negative 9g minus 3 equal to 24, and negative 9g minus 3 equal to negative 24. Okay, notice the only thing that has changed between case 1 and case 2 is the sign in front of 24. So I know that you may not want to write all of this out. I know that it is a lot of work, but if you do not do the problem this way, if you wait till later to make your cases, your answers will be incorrect. So from here, we need to add 3 to both sides of both equations. Negative 9g equals 27, and negative 9g equals negative 21. Our last step for this problem is we need to divide both sides by negative 9. So g is negative 3. Now for this answer, we know that we're not going to get something that comes out as an integer like we did for the first answer. This answer is going to stay a fraction. And what I want you to do is I don't want you to give me a decimal. I don't want you to give me a mixed number. I just want you to give me a simplified fraction. So I have 21 over 9. If I divide 21 by 3, and if I divide 9 by 3, that's going to leave me with negative 7 over negative 3, excuse me. Now remember, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So those negatives are going to cancel each other out, meaning the other answer is 7 over 3. In your Google form that you will do today as your assignment, the question asks that you put your answer in set notation. This right here is set notation. These curly braces are on your keyboard on your MacBook. They are on the same button as the square bracket button. So you just have to hit Shift and then the square bracket button to get your curly brace. So don't put any spaces in your answers, and Google Docs, Google Forms will recognize your answer as correct. So we're going to do one more together. We're going to start off this problem by subtracting 3 from both sides, because remember, first, before we do anything else, we have to get what's inside absolute value all by itself. So our first step in doing that is subtracting 3 from both sides. So I have 2/5 absolute value 4w minus 3 equals negative 10. Now, before you get in too big of a hurry, you need to remind yourself, what is the operation that is between 2/5 and the absolute value bar? This operation is multiplication. When there's not an operation showing, it's multiplication. So we know we need to divide 2/5 on both sides. But when it comes to fractions, there's an easier way to do this. Remember that if you're going to divide a fraction by another fraction, that if you keep the first fraction, change division to multiplication, and flip the second fraction, that the two arithmetic steps mean the same thing. 2/5 divided by 2/5 is the same thing as 2/5 times 5/2. So instead of dividing both sides by 2/5, what we're going to do is multiply both sides by 5/2. We're going to flip the fraction and use multiplication instead. I'm going to put the negative 10 over 1 so I have a fraction on the right. Now from here we'll see why that works. We multiply straight across. 5 times 2 is 10. 2 times 5 is also 10. 10 over 10 is just 1. And because I know 1 times the absolute value of 4w minus 3 is just going to be the absolute value of 4w minus 3, I don't need this 1. Working on the other side, negative 10 times 5 is negative 50, and 1 times 2 is 2. Simplifying this, negative 50 divided by 2 is negative 25. Now this is the step where we are ready to make our two cases. All we have over here on the left is an absolute value. Everything in there is an absolute value, so you're ready to make your cases. However, we notice one thing before we get started with our cases. We see that we have something in absolute value equaling something that's negative. Since we know that absolute value means distance away from 0, we know that we can't have something in absolute value equal something that's negative, so we say this problem has no solutions. For this last one, I want you to pause this video. I want you to work this problem on your own. When you're finished, resume the video and play to see if you got the answer right. So this problem is very similar to the problem that we just worked together. We're going to begin by adding 24 to both sides. The reason why we're beginning this way is because before I make my cases, I have to make sure that everything in absolute value is isolated. All I have on the left-hand side needs to be an absolute value, so I need to get rid of everything that's not inside absolute value. So I have 3/2 times the absolute value of 4r minus 4 is now equal to 3. So remember, the operation between 3/2 and the absolute value of 4r minus 4 is multiplication. So to undo multiplication, we have to divide. But remember from the last problem, instead of dividing a fraction, we can multiply by the reciprocal. Reciprocal just means the flipped fraction. So we're going to multiply both sides by 2/3. So 2 times 3 is 6. 3 times 2 is also 6. On this side, 3 times 2 is 6, and 1 times 3 is 3. So we notice that 6 over 6 is just going to be 1, and we don't need that 1. So what we have is absolute value of 4r minus 4. 6 over 3 is the same thing as 6 divided by 3, which is just 2. So now I notice I've got everything on the left, everything is inside absolute value. And I also notice that I have a positive answer over on the right, so I'm ready to make my cases. You must make your cases now. Once you have everything isolated in absolute value and you have a positive answer on the other side, your two cases must happen now. 4r minus 4 equals 2. 4r minus 4 equals negative 2. So then we just have two equations we have to solve. Plus 4 plus 4. 4r equals 6. 4r equals 2. Divide all sides of both equations by 4. R is 6 over 4 is not going to make a whole number, an integer. So I can divide top and bottom by 2 to simplify the fraction, and I get r equals 3/2. I can do the same thing here and get r equals 1/2. So remember today, your Google form will require you to put the answer in set notation. Try not to use any spaces. It doesn't matter what order you put your answers in. I could have put the 1/2 before the 3/2.